As many of you know, I don't typically like to review cars in Gran Turismo Sport or 7, which were already featured in the previous game. And the reason why is obvious. When you've got so many new cars to talk about, it seems like a bit of a waste of time to feature the stuff that we've already had before. The reason why I'm making this exception is because this car is one which is potentially quite a lot of money to waste if it's not very good. Not only because it's 3.6 million to buy, which is reasonable, you know, it's not the most expensive thing around, but that's still a decent amount of cash. Crucially though, because it's an invitation-only car, and it's one which I definitely don't have a great history with, because in GT Sport I pretty much roasted this car. If I recall correctly, I do not like the Veneno, and the reason why has nothing to do with real life. It's just such a wildly overrated car in the game, in terms of pricing, in terms of, especially now that you have to be invited to buy it. Oh, what a privilege. Does it live up to that price? Does it live up to needing an invitation? Because let's be honest, this thing is not on the same level as a Carrera GT or an Enzo, so to have it invitation only seems like just a bit of a way to milk it a bit longer in terms of making you wait to get certain vehicles. So for me, for example, I only just got the invitation to buy this thing, so of course I had to buy it just to be a completionist. I've still never had an invitation to buy an FXXK, and that's another reason why I wanted to talk about this one, because with vehicles like that also requiring an invitation, and of course being similar on price in many cases, it does beg the question of if this one is better, for example, than the Ferrari, or is it just worth skipping over it entirely, maybe getting something like an LP640 or an Aventador instead. Well, the long and the short of it is, it's a definite improvement, and another thing I'm going to do in this review that's a bit different is I'm actually going to talk about the tuned specs, once upgraded rather than the standard numbers which I would typically talk about, because again, if you don't buy the car, it is beneficial to know what it can do. So fully built, you're looking at 988 horsepower and 1131 kilos. Those are pretty good numbers. It's not going to break the bank against something like a Valkyrie, but then again, what can? The Valkyrie is essentially the Tommy Kyra ZZ2 of Gran Turismo 7. Now this one of course has the four-wheel drive advantage, potentially. Lamborghinis can be a bit hit and miss when it comes to Gran Turismo tuning. Of course it is naturally aspirated, so pretty powerful for a naturally aspirated engine, and the fully tuned points, at least here I'm running it on racing softs, which are of course extremely OP in terms of point level, is around 828. So it sounds good, at least on paper, but that's kind of the thing about these Lambos. But then again, it also begs the question of, should you just, as I alluded to just now, get an LP640 instead? Well, for me, I would say actually yes. Just get an Aventador, just get, you know, an SV, just get any of the other Lambos really. Of course the Vision GT could run rings around this thing as well technically, although I personally am not a fan of that either. This one is categorically not an essential purchase. However, it is definitely an improvement over the previous game, especially when you tune it. Now, because I'm probably not going to do a dedicated tuning video for this car, I'm going to give you a quick couple of pointers if you do have one and find it a bit unwieldy, to just maybe bring it under control a little bit more. I would recommend a 50-50 torque split, which of course I often do on a four-wheel drive car. I would recommend having your front 3 diff settings for acceleration, initial torque and braking all on 30, and then the rear 3 down to 10. So 30, 30, 30, 10, 10, 10, 3 full degrees, so 3.0 on camber, front and back, toe out 0.10 on the front, and toe in 0.20 on the rear, and then the rest will pretty much take care of itself. The one thing I will still say is it's very squirrely under braking, especially if you're on a track like Le Mans when you're coming from really, really high speeds, much more quickly down to super low speeds than on pretty much any other track. Under those conditions, if you even slightly turn, you really do need to keep it straight when braking at those kind of speeds, at least over 200 miles an hour in other words, because it will suddenly kind of snap toward the inside of the corner. Again, the diff can help with that, but it's a Lambo and it's just kind of one of those things that they always seem to have an issue with. It's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. If I recall correctly, I think one of my biggest criticisms of the Veneno was the braking. It's way better now in that regard. I'm still not a huge fan of stuff like the Vulcan, so I would definitely say that this is a better purchase than something like that, but compared to something like a Valkyrie, there is no question. This is quick, you know, don't get me wrong, it is very quick, and you'll see my lap, for example, here, but at the same time, it is no Valkyrie. The Valkyrie, tuned with a real driver rather than AI, will destroy this thing, just simply put. There's no competition there. Sure, it's reasonably quick. I got it up around, I think it was like 260, 270-ish miles an hour, even without NOS on Route X, so it's pretty quick, like I said, but Even then, with engine swaps and stuff, it doesn't have any kind of advantage anymore. So across the board, I wanted to talk about it because it's one of those very mixed cars. Some people who love them seem to really love them. For me, this just isn't a Reventon. I'm not the biggest fan of the Reventon either, but at least that car, to me, feels kind of more special in a way. Because now with all of these Centenarios and Venenos and all these, the Scion or Sean, whatever they call in the latest thing, they all just strike me as being like Aventador clones, kind of like what Bugatti started doing with all these Chiron variants. I'm not a fan of that, it feels lazy to me, and even with McLaren, I'm not a fan when they do it, like making the same car essentially over and over again in different forms with a slightly different amount of horsepower. This one isn't quite that bad, but it still to me doesn't have that kind of OG purity of something like a Reventon. We'll have to see if that one ever comes back, but for now, as you can kind of tell, my thoughts are, if you are a Veneno fan, and if you were hoping that it was better than the previous game, it is. It is much, much better, especially when tuned and built. For the rest of us, it is absolutely not an essential purchase. But I would love to hear if any of you disagree. Maybe you do really love it. Maybe you found it fantastic for some particular kind of event. And potentially I hope I've helped you to either decide to use some money if you do get the invitation, or maybe save you some money if you're not that bothered. That's it for this review though. I won't be doing too many like this probably at the moment, and I really do hope to get that Ferrari FXXK at some point because it eludes me so far. Until next time though, I'll see you then. And for now, thanks for watching.